In this, the last of 3 short films about cycling, we demonstrate the need for a long-term strategy to encourage this most environmentally friendly means of transport. Just what should be done and who's got the political will to do it? We also look at choosing the right bike, whether you want one for commuting, for sport or simply for fun.
I think cycling has a hugely important role to play, both now and in the future. Cycling obviously is good for people's health, but it's also a crucial way of getting cars off the road. And that matters both because of the pollution from cars that also drives climate change and also makes our cities far fuller of air pollution than they should be. So in order to keep our kids safe in the future, in order to get healthy ourselves, then having that investment in cycling is hugely important.
And the more bikes that we see, the more people on bikes that we see will tell us that this is a normal thing to do. And actually that's one of the key determinants as to how we behave, is what we see other people doing. Getting more people on bikes, flooding the city centre and the communities with bikes is one good thing. We have some cycle infrastructure and that's growing. It's not ideal, it's not where the vision of the city would like it to be, but improving segregated cycle infrastructure, particularly on busy stretches of our city's roads, would be a very positive step, and I know that the council is working on that.
As somebody who rides a bicycle, but also, might use a car or a taxi or a bus or a train or might walk, I don't see myself as being either a cyclist or a pedestrian or a motorist. I think, the council needs to think about transport policy in terms of what's best for everybody, and it would be better for everybody, in fact, particularly motorists who often have to sit in traffic jams, if they could make it much easier and for people to feel safer to be using their bicycles for short journeys.
In the city, and it's not just Sheffield, I think it's nationwide, there is a bit of a stigma towards cyclists. Not a lot of car drivers are sort of more courteous towards cyclists. They sort of come up quite close to you and you sort of feel as though you're heading into the gutter. But if you're a cyclist and a car driver like I am, you can be more assertive when you're cycling, so you don't have to cycle right in the gutter. You can cycle in the middle of the road if you want to, take up as much room as a car. And if you're a car driver, then just be patient, wait until there's enough space for you to move around safely and pass with a nice, decent passing distance between you and the cyclist.
I think that infrastructure makes people safer, but actually the thing that makes us safest is us all recognising that we've all got somewhere to be, we've all got a right to be on the road and cycle network, and we have to work together to make this happen properly. I think if we continue to have a kind of antagonistic or adversarial approach between the different modes of transport, I think we'll get into really quite difficult territory, and what we need to do is shift our culture away from car first and this kind of need for speed that there is, and to something that's a lot more relaxed, a lot less stressful and a lot better for everybody.
A way forward that doesn't involve just the car. So I think cycling, using the bus and walking are things that the council's finally starting to look at through necessity, really.
Dan Jarvis has already set out clearly that he wants to have an active transport commissioner, and he wants that person to be in post as soon as possible. I'm looking forward to working with that person when they're appointed. I think it's a really good thing to have someone who's responsible at a city region level of making sure this is all joined up and works properly. I think that's absolutely vital. It doesn't take away from the fact, though, that without the money that we need to invest in active travel, not just in terms of cycling but walking as well, and a whole range of other ways that we want to improve our transport network, without the money we can't make these things happen. The barrier we've got isn't around leadership or around a lack of plans or a lack of energy or determination. Our main barrier is around a lack of money.
It's not about making it less car friendly, it's about giving people good alternatives to the car. With cycling, it's not a good alternative to the car, and with the public transport it isn't. Public transport's gone down over the years. Cars have been given the priority. What is needed is that needs evening up a little bit. Sustainable transport, they should be getting the priority rather than cars. Things like 20-mile-an-hour zones, which we've managed to do as a Green Party, segregated cycle routes, improvements to public transport and walking routes.
We were, of course, the first city in the entire country to have 20-mile-an-hour zones whatsoever. The first one in the country was in Tinsley about 10 years ago. We've got a programme for all neighbourhoods in the city to be covered by 20-mile-an-hour schemes, which is really good. I want us to accelerate that and do it even faster and do more of them and do them in bigger areas rather than a kind of patchwork of developments. So we want to be doing that, and we absolutely believe that that is a big contributory factor to reducing both the frequency and the severity of road accidents.
Further into our interview with Jack Scott, Sheffield Council Cabinet Member for Transport and Development, we find out some of the ideas the Council has for reducing the problem of air pollution in Sheffield.
There is a huge public health crisis in this country and in this city because of our poor air quality. We will do whatever it takes to resolve that challenge, and that if that includes charging, then so be it. We'll also be looking shortly at a range of other solutions, such as a workplace parking levy, which is a charge upon all employers within the city who have perhaps more than 10 parking spaces, for example, and making sure that we are covering the pollution cost of those spaces. We're going to do a big study, first of all, to consider how many spaces there are and what kind of charges might be appropriate, and also what we can do to incentivise good behaviour from employers and from drivers as well. So we've got a range of plans. We're not taking anything off the table in terms of tackling this public health crisis that is dirty air in this country.
Are you confident that you'll have the money necessary to introduce these various plans that you mentioned?
I think confident is probably putting it a bit too strongly. I think I would say I was hopeful. In fairness to the government, which isn't something I would tend to do, but one of the things they have said is there will be a significant clean air fund that local authorities can apply to. Clearly that will be of a competitive nature, which we think is unfortunate that they pitch local authorities against each other, but we'll be part of that, and I am hopeful that our bid to that will be strong and robust and secure the investment that we'll need to implement those sorts of measures.
To compare taking the bus with using a bicycle or using a car, they got people to set off from home using different means of transport, and then timed how long it took them to get to work in the city. And it won't surprise you that a bicycle was quicker than both, in fact, the bus and the car.
So I think one of the things, if you're going to provide a viable alternative for the car, is properly integrated transport. So, for example, in Sheffield, stagecoach trams don't allow bikes on the trams, even on a Sunday when there's hardly anyone using them. So integrating it with public transport is a really important part of encouraging cycling and the use of public transport.
Sheffield Cycle Hub provides facilities for cyclists to leave their bikes and make use of public transport.
The hub has been a great success. It's actually shocked the rail industry. The rail industry as a whole tended to see Sheffield as a place that didn't cycle. But we've gone from 150 spaces originally before the hub opened to 525. On a busy day, it's 70% full. That just shows you how many more people are cycling to the station. More facilities like this are provided. If employers provide secure facilities, more people will cycle, definitely, and it will help the city no end.
But our real driver has got to get people out of their cars, and actually out of their cars either onto a bus or into some other form of active transport. Our strategy will set out a clearer set of priorities and objectives, and some of the tools that we've got at our disposal as well in terms of prioritising that type of activity. So that will probably include free cycling lessons and cycling confidence lessons for some groups of people. It will include targeted work with certain schools where we know cycling uptake is particularly low, or within neighbourhoods where we know that's a particularly low take-up of cycling. And it will include also making sure we're publicising information about walking in local centres, local libraries, that kind of thing.
As well as free cycling lessons, we need the political will to keep funding and expanding the brilliant cycling schemes such as Pedal Ready that are currently running in Sheffield.
The funding for this work comes from the Department of Transport via Sheffield City Council, Doncaster and Rotherham, and we're able to buy bikes under this, and it's part of a wider scheme called Cycle Boost, where we've worked in partnership with others, Get Cycling and Recycle Bikes, where people can loan a bike free for a period. There's no typical student, it's very, very wide ranging. We work with students from 17 up to 80, and we also have found that in the last year or so we've attracted more students from outside white British community. In particular, a quarter of our students are now from Asian or British Asian people. The Cycling for the Healthy Heart is a new project that we've got this year, funded by Heart Research UK and Subway, where people with heart risk factors are being referred from ShipShape, which is a community health and wellbeing project, and are coming to ride and try and get exercise into their daily life.
As well as borrowing or buying bikes, there are schemes for hiring them. Unfortunately, in Sheffield, we currently don't have this option.
One of the things that's happened is we had a dockless bike scheme, and that closed down when OFO started, and now OFO's pulled out, we've got neither.
So we want to look at that and see the best solution, try and work out who we might want to partner with.
What advice would you give to people taking up cycling about choosing and buying a bike?
Essential is to actually go and try it out. And amazingly, that's something that people don't do necessarily. They'll go to a shop and they'll look at the bike and be shown it, but not necessarily try it out. That is probably the top tip. You must try it out. And then it's personal choice really, whether you're going to cycle on tracks or roads.
We would generally try and find out what type of riding they want to do, you know, whether it's sport, leisure, commute and things like that, and then tailor the bike to suit their needs.
Noticed an increase in people buying second-hand bikes and fewer people buying new bikes. We tend to sell more bikes suited around commuter cycling or leisure cycling rather than sports cycling. But we have noticed a big increase in the number of people actually buying second-hand bikes as an introduction to cycling, more so than splashing out on something new.
Realistically, to be looking 350 upwards for something that's going to be durable. Again, the thing is that I know from my own experiences that cycling to work is actually very, very heavy maintenance on the bike. So if you go too cheap, you'll find that you'll be replacing parts regularly, and ultimately it becomes a more expensive bike than you initially thought it would be.
Could you describe how you started Cycles in Motion?
I started it out the back of my van. That's about the short and long of it. Started servicing people's bikes, and then that was it, and come to this point.
So you actually build bikes here?
Build bikes here, we do anything, do everything, anything and everything. Yeah, pretty much. Paint stuff, build stuff, manufacture things, you name it, we can do it.
The hills are possibly the biggest cause of people to not cycle in Sheffield, and yet it's easily overcome with a bicycle. I think people are scared that they're going to be hot, sweaty, tired out by the time they get up to the top of the hill. But if you choose the right bicycle with the right gearing, you should be fine.
I think the right bike helps. You can choose quite high geared bikes that have large cassettes, which allows you to spin much easier, easier pedalling up the hills. You can also have electric bikes nowadays, which are assisted bikes to help you get up the hills.
The electric bike market, certainly in Sheffield and our other branches in Rotherham and Chesterfield, has proven to be the biggest sort of growing market that we have. The previous concept that perhaps they were only good for one thing or one type of rider has pretty much gone by the wayside, and whether you're just a sport rider, general use, or whether you're really a keen semi-pro, they're brilliant now. Because of the number of hills, etc., and sometimes the steepness of them, the electric assist is an absolute boon. Again, people who normally would just say, I can't do that on a bike, the electric assist now makes that very, very possible.
Electric bike's going to help you. As you get older, you do get less strong.
love the freedom.
The freedom.
It's the freedom.
I'm beginning to understand the wind in your hair feeling.
Use my bike to get around all the time.
Getting around under my own steam.
So I was cycling every day.
The more bikes that we see, the more people on bikes that we see will tell us that this is a normal thing to do. And
You can have a really great time getting fit and seeing the sights of Sheffield and the Peak District.
The wonderful thing with a bike that you sort of see so much more.
I enjoy going on long rides out in the Peak District.
And we're blessed with the Peak District on our doorstep.
I'm able to cycle from home, which is kind of 10 minutes from the railway station.
Well, it's healthy, it's exercise.
Cycling can improve sleep and it can reduce stress and anxiety.
Sheffield's built on 7 hills, so yeah, you're going to encounter some hills at some point.
Downhill coming in, so that's very quick and very easy.
When people say, I don't want to cycle in a city because it's hilly, I do always say, well, where there's hills, there's valleys. And the thing that you've gone up, of course, you come down.
You don't get fit by going downhill. It's only when you're climbing is when, you know, the real work starts. So I like the hills, they're good.
Well, it's a quicker way to get from A to B than walking.
Certainly a lot quicker than trying to come into Sheffield in a car during the rush hour.
Cities like Sheffield just weren't built to cope with the amount of traffic that they're now experiencing.
To use their cars a bit less, it actually can also even be a more enjoyable way, better air, better life.
And it's more environmentally friendly than going in the car.
And anyone who's been walking through city centres recently will know just how polluted they are.
Ditch their cars and actually cycle more.
There's kind of a popular demand for safer cycling in Sheffield.
Hopefully we're going to get better infrastructure.
It's got to be safer. We've got to get cars away from bikes.
Big cycle lanes in the centre would help.
And as a cyclist myself, I know that I feel safer when I'm on those kind of routes.
I think it's something that everyone needs to get involved with and needs to do a little bit to try and improve, you know.
It's one of our last freedoms.
What's there not to love about that, really?
It's the best way of transporting. It's the way forward. It's the future.
In and around Sheffield, cycling is clearly a hugely popular activity, but largely off-road or in closed road events such as Let's Ride.
So you lost the support all the way around here. They're going up and they're very good.